All right, welcome everyone. We have a couple guests here, some honored and special guests who have been a part of these capstones for this semester. So welcome everyone. My name is Jason Oliver Chang, and I am Associate Professor of History and Asian American Studies at Uconn. I also direct the Asian and Asian American Studies Institute, which is a partner of one of the many institutes and academic units that oversee the social justice minor program here at Uconn. And today we have three of our stellar social justice minor students sharing their capstone projects with us today. So our order of business today is to, I will be sharing their bios, their short bios, and then they'll make brief presentations, about 15 minutes, and I'll keep time. If you go over, that's fine. We have ample time to do that, but we do want to reserve some time for questions and just a chance to applaud your work and to really appreciate all the work that you've done this semester and that you'll continue to do after this course. So we're going to go in alphabetical order, which means we'll go with Bria first, and Emma and Tam. And so I will I'll introduce Bria first. So Bria McFarlane is a junior studying human development and family studies and urban and community studies, and with minors in diversity studies in American culture and social justice organizing. She is the vice president of the Black Students Association and the Upsilon Sigma, the Urban Studies Honor Society, and she works as an undergraduate researcher at the Uconn Collaboratory on school and child health. Her academic and research areas of interest are school-community relations, child and adolescent socio-political empowerment, and youth's preparation for life experiences. Next, we have Emma Simmard. Emma is a senior at Uconn pursuing her Bachelor of Fine Arts and minor in social justice organizing, and her photography work often explores various social justice issues that she finds important. Tam Vu is a sophomore in an exploratory degree dedicated to student organizing and activism for Black and Asian American alliances and solidarity. And she's been working with the I'm Not a Virus campaign, the Black at Uconn Instagram account, identifying missing power in Asian American CT, also known as Impact, and is writing for the public in the CT Mirror as a part of this capstone work. We're very grateful for you taking the time to share with us, and we really want to honor the work that you've done, and have this chance to share it. So thank you guys for today in advance, and look forward to our time together. So with that, Bria, the stage is yours.
Okay. Hello, everyone. So my experience this semester was really focused around learning about activism and how I can learn to see consciously, and how I can take that experience and turn it into activism to change the world. So my PowerPoint will be centering around that. So the presentation agenda. So during my presentation, I'm first going to discuss my experience this semester. Then I'm going to explain how I decided on my final project. Then I'm going to do a run through of my final project that I created. And finally, I'm going to speak about my personal reflection on everything. So my experience this semester. So this semester, I was primarily working with Comora's Cultural Corner, and through that experience, I learned a lot of stuff. So first, one of the major parts of it was the community conversations that the KCC holds every Wednesday. And in the beginning, that was structured around pandemic learning in Hartford, and then it eventually also started to discuss socio-political events such as the election and how that impacted us as members of the communities and how that would end up impacting the schools. And we also touched upon different forms of teaching, such as abolitionist teaching, as well as virtual teaching. Another component of my experience with the KCC was that I was asked to critically watch movies, television, and music made by and for Black people. So instead of just watching it for fun like I usually would, I was able to watch these or listen to these forms of art and think about why were these Black artists and Black activists creating this, and what were they trying to tell me through this. A third part of my experience with the KCC was that I was able to do research into Black and LGBTQIA+ organizations that use art as a form of activism and community development. So being able to see how are they using art, different modes of art, to tell their stories and to get other people involved and encourage other artists who are part of marginalized communities to also use art as a medium to express themselves. In addition to my work with the KCC, I was also able to discuss with Dr. Chang and Alexis Boylan about learning how to see as a conscious and political choice. So being able to learn how what I choose to see or what I choose not to see is a choice that I make every day, and how I can better be aware of that so that I'm more conscious about what I'm processing. And the final thing that I did, which on my own, was I was attending different seminars that discussed art as a medium of cultural celebration and activism. Okay, so how I decided on my final project. So with my final project, I was trying to take my own experience of learning and the lessons that I learned from my own experience and transfer that onto how students in public schools and maybe private schools as well can experience the same thing, learn from it, and become more involved and conscious citizens. So part of that is creating a toolkit and giving them opportunities to engage in this conscious witnessing. Another thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to be able to have students think about our history, our present, our progress, and our desired future and how that takes form within our culture as well as in our everyday life. And a third thing that I was thinking about when developing my final project was thinking about creating a different perspective on teaching and learning so that it is more reflective of the experiences of students in the classroom. And so with that, I came to my final project, which is a lesson plan. And it's just applying all the knowledge that they learned. So this particular lesson plan is formed around the Black freedom movement, and essentially a history curriculum that includes the Black freedom movement so that students can take the knowledge that they have learned from the Black freedom movement and then be able to put that into the context of their daily lives so they can see the impact of the history, what's going on right now, and how to create their future. So with that, this is the lesson plan. So the first part of the lesson plan would be the opening activity. And so I created an activity called Progression, Regression, or No Change. And the point of this would be for students to think about the knowledge that they have learned so far in the class about the Black freedom movement and other American history, as well as to think about what they see in their community and what they see in society, such as on the media, and to connect those two pieces and think about whether or not they have seen progress, they've seen regress, or they've seen no change at all. So For example, one of them would be equal service and treatment by healthcare providers. So thinking about if they have seen change or not before and after the Black freedom movement has taken place. So the next activity is a video. And so with this video, I'm not going to be playing any sound, and the purpose is for you to just watch and see. Think about what you're seeing consciously. Okay. Okay. So yes, so that would be the first video that would be the video that would be shown to the students as the main material. And so with that, the purpose would be first to play it without sound so that the students would just see and think about the interaction between the characters, think about the characters' facial expressions, the reactions, and then after that, playing the video again, but without any visuals, so that the students would just listen to what they hear. And then with that, the students would write for 1 minute about what they see, what they hear, and reflecting on that. And after doing both of those, playing it with video and sound so that the students can reflect on what they are witnessing, and then they would write down and reflect on what they witnessed as a whole. And the purpose of doing it that way is to break down the senses and help the students become more in tune with their senses so they can learn how to consciously see and consciously hear what is happening around them. And yeah. Okay. And the next step would be a discussion, so an open discussion that the teacher would operate more of as a facilitator than a leader, so that the students can discuss about what they saw, heard, and witnessed in the video and whether they see that in their lives. And a part of this would be bringing in some of the statements from the progression, regression, or no change to see if what they witnessed in that video translates over into their daily life and how it's applicable through different situations. And an important thing for this is that the students will not know everything. They won't necessarily be able to immediately connect it. So it's very important that teachers are prepared in knowing more about current social issues and what's going on in the world, and being encouraged through teacher preparation programs as well as professional development. So that's an important piece that the educational system needs to work on. That way teachers can act as a helper in these conversations to provide students with the information that they may need to make these connections. And the final question on this that I think is important to mention is, what can we do as youth, as students, as citizens, as humans? So for the purpose is for the students to take everything that they've just witnessed, take what they know about history and the historical elements that are playing into their daily lives, and think about, okay, I see this playing out in two different contexts in my life. What can I do about it? How can we actually make change instead of just not doing anything at all? And so after that would be the closing activity, which is again the progression, regression, or no change. So students would once again reflect individually on whether or not they've seen change. And this time, instead of just using the knowledge that they have from history class and what they see around them in the world, they would now use what they've learned from this what they've learned from the lesson and what they've seen in the video to really think about, on a societal level, has there been any change? Do I see that sort of oppression and discrimination continue to play out into other areas? And then after that, the extension assignment, which could be a project or homework that I created, was progression through photos. So with this, students would be asked to use this new development of conscious witnessing to think about the past, think about the present, and then create their future. So in the one I created, I used integrated classrooms, and I used 3 different pictures. So the first one was a segregated classroom for the 1940s, and in that I described what I saw. The second one is from the present day, also what I saw, and I also added a statistic to it as well. And then the third one, on the right-hand side, is my ideal integrated school. So through all of these, I made sure that I wrote a little blurb about what I visually saw. And I think that's an important element for students to think about the photos that they're taking in and what do they see that is reflective of historical oppression, reflective of current oppression, and reflective of the future that they want to have for society. And so my personal reflection on everything. So through this experience, I was able to learn 4 key things. The first was I was able to learn how to process the world around us, which I think is huge. So instead of just consuming media for fun, actually thinking about, what is this trying to tell me and why is that important? And consciously thinking about, what do I see in my everyday life? What do I hear in my everyday life? And why is it like that? How can I take what I've learned in the classroom and from the curriculum and then tie it into my everyday world? The second thing I learned how to do was connect our past, our present, and what we want for our future. So thinking about how historical factors play into what we experience now, and how can I, as a human being, as a citizen, take what I am experiencing now and work with others to make it into a better future. The third thing I learned how to do was create spaces and create in spaces. So thinking about spaces such as museums where we're historically excluded, and being able to think about art that is created for us, such as Spike Lee, who is a director who started to create movies for Black people. So creating a space for us to make our own history and write our own story, and then create in spaces. So using the organizations such as the organizations of the Black and the LGBTQIA plus organizations, working in those spaces to develop a future that we want. The fourth thing that I learned was how to transform the world into our safe space. So the world is definitely not safe for us right now. So thinking about education as one of the mediums, because children are the future. So instead of just continuously teaching them this standardized curriculum, actually tying it into their lives and letting them know how to consciously witness the world around them and let them know that they can do something about it, and different ways that they can do something about it is one of my ideal ways to continue to transform the world. And that's all. I wanted to give a special thank you to Dr. Jason Chang, Kamora Harrington, and the KCC, and Alexis Boylan for assisting me with my learning experience this semester. I found it very insightful, and it was a wonderful experience. So thank you all.
Thank you so much, Bria. This was, in a word, brilliant. And I learned so much too from working with you. So I have to thank you as well. Same goes for you, Emma, and Tom as well. This has been such a wonderful experience, and I'm so proud of everyone's work. But I want to turn the stage over to Emma.
Thanks. All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. I just want to thank Jason and Bria and Tom for their collaboration and guidance throughout the semester as we work together to share feedback on our projects. And thanks to Mike as well, who's very helpful and connected me to some local photographers, which is really great. So the Capstone Project that I will be sharing today is a series of photographs that I've taken that examines the role of the female lens in photography and its effect on the representation of women in the media. So first, I'm going to share a little bit about my project, and then I will share my screen to show everyone some of the photographs. So I was inspired to do this project after taking a women's studies class in my freshman year that examined the relationship between gender and other identities such as race, sexual orientation, socioeconomic class, and disability. In this class, we explored intersectionality and the harmful effects of sexism and how it can be made worse for some women due to their ethnicity, age, disability, social origin, religion, gender identity, or sexual orientation. Gender inequality persists everywhere and stagnates social progress. Women and girls are bombarded with sexist images and behavior on a daily basis. The sexualization of women, threats, shaming, comments on appearance, sexist language and jokes, street harassment, and college fraternity parties that promote sexual themes for women are all too often regarded as normal. These acts become normalized and can lead to the acceptance of violence against women and girls. There's a lot that we can do to help build a more gender equal world. Understanding the deep roots of gender inequality and challenging discrimination when we see it are the first steps. Lasting change will come when the social institutions that affect women's lives also change. Mass media is emerging as a social institution that is replacing more traditional institutions like school, church, government, and family, and disseminating information to society, particularly young people. This is important because it has a larger and larger role in defining gender and social norms. The media plays an important role in defining these social norms, as the images we see in our everyday lives ultimately define what we view as normal. Since the majority of photojournalists are white men, the portrayal of women in the media does not tell the story of women, but of white men's perceptions of them. No matter how hard photographers try, they can't help but carry their consciousness, biases, and personal views into their work. Thus, it's important to have photographers as diverse as our world in order to create a more inclusive representation of society in the media. For years, we've been trying to answer the impossible question of how much society has been shaped by the media. In the case of gender equality, does the media's portrayal of women simply reflect the stereotypes that exist within society, or does it help to create them in the first place? Most would agree that the media plays some role in shaping the society we live in by silencing or amplifying certain voices and normalizing stereotypes that reinforce gender inequality. Most would also agree that we need change, but it will not necessarily come from the media itself. Ordinary people have increasingly more power to help create the positive change needed through their own personal social media. The hashtag #MeToo and the hashtag #NiUnaMenos movements are examples of how social media gives women a platform to speak out about sexism and sexual abuse. These types of movements allow women from all backgrounds around the world, including those without traditional power, to be heard. Many women feel frustrated by the way they're objectified, hypersexualized, and sensationalized by the media, or left out of the story entirely. Gender stereotypes can lead to anxiety and depression in women and incite violence against them. Social media has opened a new door for women's rights organizing to combat these issues by encouraging solidarity and shared experiences. Most importantly, it allows for a more level playing field where women can highlight the inequalities and injustices they have personally experienced in their corner of the world. So during this project, I worked collaboratively with the women that I photographed to represent their true selves. Changing what our culture considers a normal representation of women is a collaborative effort. We need to work together to make sure that our visual storytellers are as diverse as the people and issues that they cover. In the meantime, we can harness our own personal power to reshape society's views of women and become our own visual storytellers. We can also use our voices to include the millions of women around the world who do not have internet access, or who suffer from online harassment or targeted repression due to the increased visibility that comes with speaking up. The feminist movement is premised on the idea that we all share responsibility for eliminating sexism and for striving for a world where no woman is a victim of gender discrimination. The media can be a useful tool for fulfilling these responsibilities, but only if we use it in a way that empowers women instead of stereotyping them. So now I'm going to share my screen. One sec. Cool. Just making sure you can see that, right? Cool. Okay, so the name of the website is diversitybehindthelens.capstone.com. If you'd like to visit it to take a closer look. Okay, so these are all the pictures. I'm going to share a few of them. I asked each of them to share their thoughts about how they feel women are represented in the media, so I could learn from everyone's point of view and also as a part of the collaborative process. So you can click on to like go through the slideshow. So, okay, so this is Cheyenne. Here I was trying to portray her as confident, calm, easygoing, and this is what she wanted to share about how she feels women are represented in the media. So she said, many women feel the unavoidable pressure to live up to unattainable standards of what they see online. I think this could be changed with more representation, so women are able to see themselves in the media and know that they are good enough just the way they are. Oops. This is Sia. I wanted to show here that she's very happy and comfortable in her own skin. Comfortable just as she is. She's also very passionate about voting. That's her shirt. And she shared this about how women are represented, or how she feels they're represented. So she said, women must be represented in social media in the way that they feel most comfortable in their skin and how they want to express themselves. Right now, there's a lot of pressure on women to portray a certain image to achieve popularity and beauty standards, or they feel the need to post to feel validation based on likes or comments. Women should be free to make their own decisions about their portrayal in the media without being bound to the confines of societal patriarchy or beauty standards. So this is Abigail. She's very socially responsible, always trying to help others, and definitely a change maker. So I wanted to portray that about her in this image. She said, the problem isn't necessarily that women are underrepresented in the media, but that only one type of woman is portrayed. Not only does this create unrealistic expectations for what girls think their own bodies should look like, but it pushes the narrative that true women are white, skinny, able-bodied, and cisgender. It is time for the media to reflect the diversity that exists among women and to celebrate it as a strength, rather than allowing it to divide us. So I think I'll go through a few more of them and then pass it off to Tom. This is Sierra. She's photographed here in front of a stone wall, which I chose to portray her strength. She also has a very strong personality. She's also overcome many obstacles throughout her life. And I wanted her wheelchair to blend into the background and for her to stand out because she doesn't want to be defined by her wheelchair. She writes, women in the media are all portrayed to have the perfect body, and a woman without that is seen as less than those deemed pretty. This could be helped by the media changing their portrayal of women. If people could realize there is no such thing as the perfect body, then women would stop putting so much strain on themselves to obtain it. Okay, here's Sophia. She's interested in the outdoors and conservation, so I wanted that to be reflected in her portrait. She said, in the last several years, female representation in the media has substantially improved, but still has a long way to go in order to move away from being over-sexualized, whitewashed, fat-shaming, and ageist. This can continue to be changed by broadening representation for all women, so that every girl can watch TV, flip through a magazine, turn on a movie, and see themselves reflected on the pages or screen. Okay, I think I'll do one more. This is Amy. She's very kind and humble, and so those were some of her favorite qualities and ones that we wanted to portray here in this portrait. She said, I think more recently women have been portrayed in a more whole way in ads, magazines, and videos. I think women are still idealized, but there is also more of an interest in their personality, the food they eat, relationships, struggles they face, etc., instead of simply their successes, bodies, or looks. There are also different kinds of women portrayed, so it is more representative. But even though there is increased acceptance of everyone, I still feel that the idea of the ideal woman is similar to the past. Okay, so I think I'll end there, but feel free to visit the website to see the rest of the portraits. Thanks.
Wow, that I just love the use of your craft and this careful analysis, and that's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing the website with us.
Thanks.
It's again brilliant. Now, Tom, I want to turn the stage over to you. Thank you.
Hi everyone, so I have a presentation to share. Um, so my capstone project was like an interview and research series on Afro-Asian solidarity. It was heavily inspired by my first semester in college with my first class being Intro to Non-Western Politics and how the discussion of the hierarchy of race came about. We discussed how race plays a huge is a big role in the global stage of like capitalism and such. Um, and I wanted to kind of have a more like local kind of understanding of Afro-Asian solidarity and Afro-Orientalism coming from it. So the first thing I'm going to be showing you guys is the presentation agenda. There were a few basic readings that I came across or I was recommended and such about Afro-Asian solidarity. A lot of these touched on some of like the core concepts that were really important in furthering my interviews and on impact, which is coming up in the next two things. So the interview series was through the I Am Not a Virus campaign, but there were also a few interviews outside of that with, for example, political science candidate Lily Liu with her understanding of intersectionality in political theory and a few other interviews here and there. Then there was Impact. Impact is the Identifying Missing Power in Asian Americans in Connecticut conference, and it happens. It happens every year, but this year, with current events and things like that, there was an emphasis on allyship and solidarity. So this was, I think, a really good way to sort of create action items and discuss like the Asian American culture, more conversations about being allies to the African American community at Uconn. And then the final thing would be the CT Mirror article wrap up. And that's going to compile all the concepts that I've gotten and the experiences I've gotten from the other three aspects of the capstone. So the first thing I kind of dived into is the basic readings and research. A few of the readings that I've gone through were readings and non-readings would be the model minority myth stereotype as like a guideline for the empire. And this reading really kind of emphasized race as a hierarchy to me. And it also emphasized how susceptible being Asian American um, can make you avoid discussing anti-blackness and things like that. It sort of set the stage for sort of some of the interviews with students talking about anti-blackness with their parents and understanding race. So that was the main like use of that. Bandung is Done was reading on the Bandung Conference of 1955 and kind of the discussing anti-imperialism in the global setting. It discussed from Afro-Orientalism of Du Bois to this, and I think it was a good stage to discuss like sort of the setbacks of Afro-Orientalism and how that played out once like goals were made. I do want to mention that from this reading, I did find the Asian Women's Conference of 1949, which many argue is the setting stage of anti-imperialism for Afro-Asian solidarity. But this conference is like more well known for having many more players and a little bit more historical relevance. Then there was some local readings with the Asian American Racial Justice Toolkit, which was about like vocabulary basic concepts. And the next two pieces are one was the video by Hassan Minhaj on George Floyd that relates more to the local context. I believe that's like specifically in the local context. And it discussed like how being Asian American can set the stage for being complicit with the hierarchy of race. And with the Pan American Asian Solidarity reading, there was a discussion of historical figures such as Grace Lee Boggs and Yuri Kochiyama, and how Afro-Asian solidarity looks like in America. So from that reading and research, I had an interview sort of series with a few people. First was Alan Tan on model minority. Alan's discussion was mainly about the bamboo ceiling and how easy it is to sort of accept the status quo of whiteness, of fitting into the specific role that the model minority puts you in the business sphere. From there was a discussion with Ted Sue and how political figures are not just always going to be a voice for people. A lot of political actors are cogs, and it's easy for us to misinterpret them. So Alan Tan was really sort of the business sphere of things and discussing how like Asian American model minority myth sets up the stage for white supremacy. San Chan, Yuan Lee, and Drum Nguyen were three people I interviewed on Vietnamese conservatism. So just a little context on Vietnamese conservatism specifically. Vietnamese people, by like a statistical graph, are known as the like only Asian American group that is conservative and heavily conservative at that. And a lot of that discussion was about the after effects of like communism and things like that, and misinterpretations of what communism attempts to do. We also discussed how race is kind of hard for understanding with a monolithic identity coming outside of the US. So in Vietnam, monolith, but over here, not so monolith, and understanding that was difficult. So we discussed like the starting points of that conversation. Something that came from this interview was setting the stage for conversations about anti-Blackness. And it always started with a conversation about understanding that there's a background that we don't understand with communism, and speaking over is never okay. Afterwards, we have Black at Uconn's Instagram page. Black at Uconn kind of had a lot of notoriety over the summer about being a Instagram page for Black students to voice their concerns with Uconn anonymously and call out sort of the racist rhetoric at Uconn. But then it began to devolve into this general conversation about racism as a whole, and a lot of cultural organizations were discussed in this Instagram page, and anti-Blackness was also discussed with anti-Asianness, and a multitude of identities were discussed. So the conversation we had with Black at Uconn was about intersectionality and how it is a natural progression into intersectionality when it comes to creating anti-racist spaces, regardless of if it starts off as just anti-Blackness or anti-Asian. It requires itself to become intersectional. And sort of how that process can get messy or not messy. And finally, we had Lily. Lily is a little bit more related to my specific field of study with political theory. We discussed how political theory kind of has a white lens at the moment, with like a very objective, this is how people act and things like that. And with Lily, the discussion with Lily, we discussed how the language of like emotions and identity politics is not removed from discussing political theory. So those were the outcomes of the interview series. And following that was the impact, allyship, and solidarity discussion. We discussed anti-Blackness in one of the conversations, and then other aspects of ways to be an ally within the Asian American community with other discussions. But towards the end of that, we discussed intersectionality with the final Pan-Asian Council group meeting, and we discussed action items and follow-ups. Lily was a big aspect of this follow-up, and impact was kind of like the biggest chunk of the project that came out of it. From this, I provided a list of resources, sort of like a discussion list and things like that. And then Lily provided this Grace Lee Boggs video. And for the sake of time, I hope I can share it. It's 2 minutes, so I'm gonna share it with you guys. Can you guys hear that?
No, I can't hear the audio.
Okay, I'm gonna try to share one more time.
in concepts of representative democracy, that we believe that it's getting other people to do things for us, that we progress. And I think that we've reached the point now where we're stuck with a whole lot of concepts, so that when Michael Moore speaks about the number of people who make all this money and the number of people who don't, it sounds as if we're struggling for equality with them. Who wants to be equal to these guys? I think we have to be thinking much more profoundly. Actually, to go back to what Marx said in the Communist Manifesto over 100 years ago, when in talking about the constant revolutions in technology, he ended that paragraph by saying, all that is sacred is profaned, all that is solid melts into air, and men and women are forced to face with sober senses our conditions of life and our relations with our kind. We're at that sort of turning point in human history. And I think that talking about recovery, talking about democracy, we too easily get sucked into old notions of what we want. So we're expecting protests. I'm not expecting someone to protest. I don't mind protests, and I encourage them at times. But what happened in 2001 in Porto Alegre, Brazil, when people gathered to say another world is necessary, another world is possible, and another world is happening. I think that that's what's happening in Detroit in particular. People are beginning to say the only way to survive is by taking care of one another, by recreating our relationships to one another, that we have created a society over the last period in particular where each of us is pursuing self-interest. We have devolved as human beings.
That's Grace Lee Boggs. She'll be celebrating her 95th birthday 2 days after the U.S. Social Forum that's going to be taking place here.
So from this video, this kind of shifted the conversation from just overall Afro-Asian solidarity to sort of like reshaping how that evolves Asian Americans being a political identity. And that's sort of what I'm doing with the CT Mirror article, which
we wanted to go,
which is here. So with the goal of the upcoming article, the first component would be just overall anti-Blackness in the Asian American community. This is going to include the interviews with Sanchan, Jung Nguyen, and Yuan Lei. And we would discuss also the history of model minority myth, LA race riots, and George Floyd, because of the Asian American cop that was also involved with the situation. So sort of a general anti-Blackness conversation. The second one would be about historical context, and the emphasis here is what is erased from Afro-Asian, from history about Afro-Asia, with the Bandung Conference, the Women's Conference in 1949, and then sort of how the model minority myth is a recent concept and not necessarily always been the aspect of history. And finally, the third thing would be current Afro-Asian solidarity. So that would include the resources gathered from the anti-Blackness conversation at PAC, Veggie Cooperatives information, Pivot, which is the progressive Vietnamese translation movement, and then discussing more about the Conference of Women in Asia in 1949 and how that relates to us now. So that's the upcoming article and the final piece of the project. I want to take this time to also personally reflect with this stuff as from this conversation, I actually got to engage with Lily a lot more about what political theory means. Before that, there was a solid understanding that it's just from the bottom up and things like that. But from Lily's conversation, I got to learn about authors like Audre Lorde and Kimberly Crenshaw about what intersectionality really means. And that's going to play a big part in this article as well. So that's what I have for everyone today. Thank you to Professor Jason Chang, Mike Kyo. I am not a virus founder. Lily Lu and the Pan Asian Council at Uconn for letting me pursue the anti-Blackness conversation with them.
This is tremendous, Tom. I am so impressed with the work that you've pulled together and the conversations that you've generated. And we're all going to be learning from this. As with all of your projects, these are tremendous examples of what people can do with a social justice minor. And I know that while this is a capstone that is supposed to be the completion of a series of work, it indeed feels more like a launching point into more and deeper engagements with your communities, with your craft, and I am just so excited for you to continue the journey. We do have some time where we can hear from the audience if interested. I have a question for everyone, but if anyone would like to ask our presenters a question, just let me know in the chat or just pop on. Well, while we're, if people are considering a question, let me ask this. I think it would be interesting for people to know, how did your experience at Uconn prepare you for this capstone? But then also, what I'm kind of more interested in is how did this experience stretch you? And what was unexpected that you didn't think you were going to learn from this? Anyone can go first.
I can start. So with my first year studying poli-sci at UConn, I had intro to non-Western, and that's how I perceived politics to be like from the get-go. And then afterwards, I had another class, and that was actual like political theory, the mainstream political theory. And I had an understanding from there that the political science sphere is not as revolutionary or understanding of like intersectionality as I hoped it would be. And then with understanding that, I understood that everything that I've been learning up to now was also pretty framed in a very liberal perspective of like reform and things like that, and not really about what intersectionality really meant. This project kind of helped me redefine that in my mind. So I was really grateful for that. And I think this project really stretched my understanding of what it's going to be like to make be a political, like making changes with policy that I want to see. I had a very different perspective of it until now. Mainly thanks to Lily and what she taught me about. But, yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, I guess I'll go next. So how did my experience at UConn prepare me? So during my freshman year, I took 2 courses. Both were related to social justice and social change within education. So I think one of them was actually called social change in education, and the other one was power, privilege, and public education. So that was my introduction into the educational system and the way it is currently and how we can change it and how we can start to create activism and reformation within education. And the other part of my experience so far was a lot of engagement in the Black community as well as in Black classes to enrich my understanding of Black experiences in America and just talk with my peers as well as with faculty members about what do they go through. That way it's not just me and my experience, but it's what I know about them. So that's what I came into this capstone course with. And then for what was unexpected, I'll do that one next. When I came into the capstone, I was very much focused on, well, I thought I was going to be doing a lot of just straight, narrow education, speaking specifically to students, that sort of thing. But it got shifted over time and it started to take more of an, I guess, it started to focus more on art, which I wasn't expecting because I've never taken an art course. And so being able to look at art and look at media as a form of empowerment and as a form of education was something that I did not expect at all. And I think that's also one way that it has stretched me, because activism, firstly, activism is not on this straight, narrow path. It's all very much interconnected, which was a huge thing that I learned from this. And it also brought in my perspective of the world, because, oh, I think it's my phone, because if I just stayed on the straight and narrow with speaking to students and doing all the stuff that I planned to, then I probably wouldn't have been as consciously aware of what is going on in the world. Yeah. I think it's also helping me prepare, because I want to do, since I'm a junior right now, I do want to do not a research, but like a social project through one of the Uconn research grants. And this is definitely helping me form and think about what I want to continue to do, which I think is great, because it's helping me as a researcher and as an activist think about my interests better, as well as give me a broader sense of what is going on in the world and how I can continue to connect with my own ideas as well as with other people.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. Emma.
Yeah, I've taken so many great courses at UConn. My art courses, human rights courses, women's studies courses. Not only have I learned a lot in those classes, but I've had a lot of great teachers that have really inspired me to keep going with that information and to merge my interest in art and my interest in social justice. And it's been really a fun experience. And one of the great things about this project too was how much I learned from the people that I worked with and just the conversations that we were able to have. And I just really enjoyed, hearing their opinions, and it was just really enlightening. And yeah, I just really enjoyed the experience.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, we have just a few minutes left if there's any questions. Also for Bria, Emma, and Tam, if you have questions for each other, we could probably have one or two more before our time is up.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. I had a question for Emma. So, okay, I'm not muted. Okay. So I noticed that a lot of your photos, well, all of your photos were black and white, and they were also shot vertically. And I feel like that's probably an artistic choice. And I was wondering if you could just speak about that.
Yeah, I took them all vertically. I wanted them to be as cohesive as possible. So I took them all vertically in like portrait style. And I made them all black and white too because of the variety of backgrounds. And like they didn't have like a studio backdrop. They were all taken outdoors in different places. So I made them black and white to make them a little bit more cohesive since they were all in different places, but also to really eliminate any distractions in the pictures. And so you could really focus on their expressions and their faces and the emotions in the pictures.
Tom, were you gonna ask a question?
Yeah, hi. I actually had a question for Bria. With the lesson plan that you were discussing, I know you mentioned that the teacher would be educated or like at least have an understanding of the video clip. With that and with the consideration that like the classes are obviously going to have a certain age group, things like that, would you be like, would it be difficult for you to come up with exactly what that education looked like? And what would you imagine that education would look like?
Oh, okay. So with this, first about the teacher preparation, I think the specific video that I chose, it was just an example. So I'm sure that there are a lot of other videos and songs and movies that teachers can choose from, but the primary focus of the teacher education concept was about making sure that teachers as a whole are prepared through their preparation program as well as through professional development to be more conscious and have more knowledge about social issues that are going on. That way, it's not just they know math or they know history and that's it, but they actually know what's happening in these communities that they're teaching in. They know what's happening in the world as a whole. That way they can provide better support for the students to become more conscious about what's happening and help develop them into activists. And then, can you repeat your second question? I think it was related to education.
Yeah, just about like the age group of the children. Does the like background information, the resources that the teacher would have, does that vary with the students?
Okay, so I imagine it would. In this example that I created, it was very much focused on a predominantly Black and brown classroom, but this lesson plan or this lesson structure would obviously have to be differentiated for a predominantly white high school as a high school that's in the suburbs. So I think that's the major point behind teacher preparation, because in a predominantly white school that is in the suburbs, it's very unlikely that the students will know about the social issues. So even if it's a white teacher teaching in a white school, a predominantly white school in a predominantly white suburb, they still need to be educated on what's happening in the society as a whole, because white schools are predominantly white schools in suburbs are the ones who would benefit most from this lesson, because they don't see these realities going on. And if the teachers aren't informed, then they can't help support these students, and the students wouldn't be able to come to that conclusion.
Thank you. We have one question from Mike in the chat, and this is going to be our final question here. And well, it's directed first to Bria, but then to both Emma and Tam as well. So what, Bria, this is from Mike, was it difficult for you to come up with the evaluations or the assessments? And then for Emma and Tam, how did you choose your interview questions and why?
Okay, so for me, I guess yes and no. As a whole, it was very difficult in terms of the assessment that I created, the final assessment that I created. It was difficult to think about which one to choose, because there are so many different avenues that you can take. But through the meeting that I had with Dr. Chang and Alexis Boylan, she really introduced to me different ways for us to consciously see. And one of the ways that she introduced to me was looking at a picture and thinking about, what do you see in that picture? What do you not see in that picture? What do you want to put into that picture if you could? And I thought that would be perfect for this sort of end assignment, because it's taking, well, what we know in terms of history, as well as the world is going on, what we know in terms of history and what is going on around us, looking at those pictures, thinking about what we see, and then once again, consciously looking and considering, well, how do I want to change it to make it my ideal? And I think that would be a great creative exercise for students to do.
Yeah, the visual language, and I think we could even say a kind of visual competency is a skill, and it has to be practiced, and to train our eyes as much as we train anything else. Emma and Tam, would you like to respond to Mike's question?
So from my interview question was, it was pretty much the same question that I was sort of investigating, you know, exploring the representation of women. And because I was exploring that, I wanted to hear about what they all had to say, because their answers could really sort of help me with my process and help sort of inform the way that I take photos, just listening to their opinions. And also it's just like great to learn from them and to hear what they had to say about that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I imagine there's also a subtle quality of that the photographs capture these individuals in their moments of explaining their viewpoints. You know, that after sharing something, it can change you in a way, how you hold yourself, the way you look at other people, that there's a kind of quality, at least I observed it in there, where you see something, you know, a kind of recognition in their face, so and their posture. So it's a really you know amazing kind of methodology and kind of technique, and just grateful for your craft in that. Yeah, Dom.
So since a lot of my stuff was about like history and a race history, before like the interviews with it depended on the person, but like with the students and back at Uconn, there were like certain things that we would agree that we watched and centered our conversation on. So with like um the students who were like Asian American discussing race with their parents, um, it, I sent like a lot of stuff from like BIPOC resources, that like resource list that I had listed in the racial justice toolkit. But then with like Lily, obviously she knows a little more than I do about intersectionality, so I didn't really provide resources. So that was like sort of the beginning, and then with the interview questions, I think that I set up a lot of interview questions in the beginning, like framing specifically into the topics, discussing certain political events and things like that. But then I realized over time that that doesn't really like frame everything that they want to discuss. Um, so sort of like halfway through some of the questions, I would like deviate, and that's like something I learned from interviewing.
Yeah, no, one of the things I was going to say about just in observing your journey, all of your journeys in this capstone, is your guys' ability to think on your feet, and to take the project in all its fullness, and to kind of roll with it in a way that that allowed you to discover and grow and experiment. So I think, you know, that's also not something you can really put on a syllabus, but I think it's a fantastic. You guys have done such an amazing job. So this is a small way that we can applaud your work and honor it. So thank you. Thank you for your work, for sharing, and that this is going to continue to grow. You know, one way to define an activist is that they're working on a problem that society thinks is normal, and so you know, making it, you know, working on that is challenging, because it is difficult work that isn't often recognized, but the impacts are real. and I just want to, if there's any encouragement that this experience has given you, that that this is much needed work, and we're so proud of that, what you've done. So that's all of our time together. We'll be in touch more, but I want to thank the audience for joining us today, and yeah, this will be a video that we'll post on the Asian and Asian American Studies Institute website for if you would like to direct other people here to check it out. That'll be there for everyone to see. So thank you guys. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Jason.